site. There are a lot of biblical references to Ahab's house of ivory. Ivory is kind of used again as a way of talking about this Phoenician Jezebel and her decadence, these house of ivories in Kings and Amos 3:15. The abundance of ivories actually found at Samaria. And so actually we find ivories at Samaria. And you can compare these ivories to the ivories that we see in contemporary Assyria. Right, the woman in the window motif was one that we looked at. Here's one from Samaria. Here's one from Nimrud. Same face, same pillars, same use of framing. And also, right, these ivory sphinxes, done in different styles, but clearly the same composition, the same emic notion of what an ivory inlay should look like. And this one also comes from Nimrud, this one from Fort Shalmaneser. Again, these are contemporary, so we see where the Assyrians are drawing inspiration, materials, and then also sometimes the ivories themselves. As we've seen, the Omrids fall, and they're succeeded by a man named Jehu. Jehu succeeds the throne of Israel. He actually assassinates the last king of the line of Omri, as well as Jezebel. And we've encountered Jehu before, right, at on the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. But essentially during this time, Israel remains independent. They're bound to Damascus as a vassal kingdom, and eventually conquered by the Assyrians. Samaria is conquered by Sargon II in 720, and it's annexed into Assyria proper, and its population deported during that time. So kind of the end of Israel to the north. But Judah to the south continues on for a couple more years at least. Again, it's best known in the 8th and 7th centuries, less well known in the 9th and 8th centuries. But Jerusalem, again, is the major urban center of this region. And under the reign of King Hezekiah, who ruled from around 727 to 698, Jerusalem is able to fortify its position and rebel against Assyria. And this is right when we see King Sennacherib make his attempt to take Jerusalem and fail, partly because some of the fortifications and water systems that at least are attributed to King Hezekiah during this time. You can actually visit these water systems. If you go to that site I mentioned, the City of David, this contested tourist attraction, which again is very politically dubious. You can actually walk through this water system and pop out the other side. So it's a really interesting, facet of the archaeology there. But we do know that Sennacherib fails in taking Jerusalem. He has to take Lachish instead. Ultimately, though, Judah is conquered by Assyria and ends up paying tribute after the fall of Lachish. So again, we looked at Lachish. Here are those reliefs of Sennacherib again, the central Lachish reliefs from Nineveh. A few other sites. Ramat Rachel is a site just south of Jerusalem, and it was a military base in the 7th century. And we see the same types of Proto-Aeolic capitals that we saw in the north. Also the same type of ivory carving. Again, this is the same slide, but ivories that are similar to those in Samaria. So the same kind of material culture in the north and the south during this time. Let's look at some of the objects, more objects, what we know about Israel and Judah during the 8th and 9th centuries, or for the 9th to the 7th centuries. We don't have much, not too much evidence to talk about cult and worship. We have a number of 4-horned altars, which are made of ashlar masonry. They appear in the 9th century at Tel Dan. And there's some earlier examples of these 4-horned altars, actually very early examples, as early as the Iron One around 1000 BCE. I excavated the earliest one, actually, to be found in Ashkelon. And it might not be a 4-horned altar, but it's linked to the same tradition. So this goes way back. Again, it appears that the Israelites are drawing on practices that even precede them. Nothing is black and white, right? Of course, everyone's drawing on everybody else. So, long story short, 4 horned altars, a number of them from this period, and also these pillar figurines, these very interesting pillar figurines from Judah, made out of clay. And these are linked to the Ashtoreth, these so-called pillar figurines that would have played a part in daily cult and daily life in Israel and Judah during this time. Burial customs, we find that burials take place in rock-cut chambers and caves with benches cut into them, some quite elaborate, and group burials, typically done by family. And it's from some of these burials that we have some of our inscriptions that date to this period, which kind of coincide with what appears to be a rise in literacy during this time and the spread of Hebrew. We have a few monumental inscriptions, some like this one from the tomb lintel of Shebnayahu, dating to the 7th century, and Shebnayahu was actually another character who maybe was in Isaiah, but the inscription actually states, "There's no gold, there's no silver or gold here. Cursed be the man who opens this tomb." Trying to dissuade people from opening up his tomb. And in addition to these kinds of inscriptions, we actually have a number of ostraca in Hebrew from places like Tel Hespan with Hebrew writings on them. And these ostraca, again, are just potsherds that are used, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they're flat, and one can write on them quite easily in ink. So again, tied to the spread of literacy. So again, this is some of the archaeological evidence that dates to a period in which we don't have a lot of text, we don't have a lot of archaeology, and the archaeology we do have is inherently tied to the politics of the present. Most complete evidence that we have about this is written much later in the 2nd or 1st centuries BC, and these are actually coming from the site of Qumran. And it was there that the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1952 and 1956, which give us some of our earliest accounts of this period. However, again, right, as complete as these accounts are, they're written centuries later and open to interpretation and question, as always. So, so that's about it for what I wanted to cover today. Do check out that talk on Wednesday if you can. Any questions about this material, the Ark of the Covenant? No? Temple of Jerusalem? Okay, see you guys on Wednesday.